Since Doctor Who is now on BBC iPlayer for the first time, I thought I'd give a bit of a recommendation as such as where to start, because it can be quite daunting. There's 60 years worth of stuff on there now, 26 series, 700 odd episodes. And it can be quite daunting to go into it and try and think, do I start at the beginning and go through? Do I start with a certain Doctor and do that? And of course, really, it's up to you, but I'm just here to give my opinion on stories that are a really good gateway for new viewers into classic Who. Stories that are not necessarily the best or my personal favourites, but some that are a really good way of getting into it if you've not seen it before. So my aim with this is just to pick out 10 stories, one from each Doctor and a couple of bonus picks, and a good example of what the show was doing at the time. Might be a good way for people to get into it if they haven't seen it before, and they're all pretty good stories as well, not going to lie. So, starting with the first Doctor. I'm picking the Aztecs for a very simple reason, because it's a really, really good, strong example of the historical stories that were very popular during the 60s, mostly during William Hartnell's era. It's a really cool story. It's basically the Doctor, his companions, Susan, Ian and Barbara, land in, Mexico during the time of the Aztecs, and Barbara is basically essentially mistaken for a god, and it plays on the morality of, can we change time? Barbara wants to look at ending human sacrifices. Ian is caught up in some other shenanigans that gets him into a fight. It's a beautifully designed story. The sets look marvellous, considering the show was made on a shoestring budget, and this is from its very first season. You can't really go wrong. It's a really tight 4-part story. It all exists. You don't have to worry about missing episodes or recons or anything. It's all there. And if you want to look at the classic era and you want to get into a bit of William Hartnell and look at the historicals, this is definitely one to go for. Anyway, on to choice number 2. For the second Doctor, I've picked The Mind Robber, and this is a brilliant story. It's the story that got me into the black and white stuff, because when I was younger, I did have a bit of a problem. I was alright watching the 80s stuff, and then I got into the 70s stuff, but it always took me a little bit longer to break into those black and white earlier episodes. I was fairly young at the time, I can't lie, but this was the story that got me into it because it's so weird. I can't really even give a rundown. It basically takes place entirely in this realm of fiction where the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe are trying to not become part of this fictional world and having to break out of there. There's some really cool abstract stuff. There's some great cliffhangers. I'm very sorry, because someone was also trying to light fireworks in the distance, which is my fault for trying to record this on Bonfire Night Weekend, but it's fine. What was I saying? The Mind Robber, yes. It's perfect. It's a really good example of the weird abstract sci-fi stuff of the 60s that I love, not just in Doctor Who, but in other things as well. It's got some fantastic performances. It's really creepy and atmospheric. The first episode alone takes place pretty much just within the TARDIS and just outside the TARDIS, and basically just with the 3 regular cast. And that's what happens a lot with Doctor Who. You get the first episode that is just basically the regular cast, and they quite often turn out to be really good gems, even in some poorer stories throughout the era. The first episode is usually really good because it's just the Doctor and his companions trying to work out what's going on and where they are and everything, and it's really well paced, because although this is a 5-parter, each episode is quite short. They're only 20 minutes rather than 25, so it's still basically the same amount of time anyway. It's just a bit more faster paced, which is something that if you're used to in the new era, then you're going to fit right in with this. And I guarantee you, if you watch this, you'll fall in love with the 60s. And there's some absolute crackers laden throughout there as well. And also, if you want a really good way of watching this, watch the Tales of the TARDIS that's just come out on BBC iPlayer that features a new scene at the beginning and the end with Jamie and Zoe. It cuts the whole thing into one omnibus as well, so you don't have to worry about skipping through the credits or anything. Not that you should ever skip the credits of Doctor Who, they're brilliant. But it just makes it really easy to watch. It's like a nice hour and a half bit of telly that really is just brilliant. Okay, so for the third Doctor, I've chosen The Time Warrior. Now, The Time Warrior isn't necessarily one of my favourite third Doctor stories. Not to say it's bad by any means, it's brilliant. But it's a really, really tightly paced. It's one of the only times, if not the only time, where the third Doctor goes back in time. It's the first appearance of the Sontarans, which we are very familiar with in the new series. It's the first appearance of Sarah Jane. It's the first story in John Pertwee's last series, and it's almost like he's sort of playing a slightly more relaxed, more fun Doctor, kind of like how Capaldi is in Series 10, where he's a bit more whimsical and things, and he's having a lot more fun with it, because he knows he's done absolutely everything he wants to do with the role. The story is great, though. Sarah Jane gets a fantastic introduction. It's a really strong, solid, historical story with some beautiful design. There's a couple of actors that you will probably recognise from other shows in there as well. But overall, I just think this is a really strong one to get into in the third Doctor's era, because some of them are a bit longer than 4 parts. Some of the greats in there that I thought about mentioning Inferno, I thought of mentioning the Demons. These are all great, by the way. But if you want to start with the third Doctor, and you want something that's a bit sort of close to home in terms of the monsters and everything, you've got Sontarans, you've got Sarah Jane. Honestly, you'll be in for a treat. Bonus pick time. I tried, when I was doing this list in my head, I wanted to try and stay away from the things that people always recommend, but there was no way I couldn't include Genesis of the Daleks. It's a classic for a reason. You know, it's really sort of atmospheric. I keep saying atmospheric, don't I? It's really tense. It's action-packed. It's got some great character work. It's the first appearance of Davros, and it shows how the Daleks are created. And obviously, we're very familiar with the Daleks in the new series now, but this allows you to go back and see how they were created at the time. There's some fantastic performances, again, some cracking cliffhangers, and I think it's got one of the most iconic moments in Doctor Who history with Tom Baker's "Do I Have the Right" speech, which has been quoted so many times ever since then. So yeah, that's my bonus pick. For the fourth Doctor, I am picking Horror of Fang Rock, because I thought I've picked something from the earlier Tom Baker era, the sci-fi, when it's quite hard sci-fi and stuff. I thought I'd pick a really standout gothic, very closely linked with the Philip Hinchcliffe era, which is where the show is at its most gothic and creepy. Although this isn't Philip Hinchcliffe, it still very much feels as that part of the middle of Tom Baker's era. You know, it's all set within one location. It's quite reminiscent of things like Midnight. You know, it's tense, it's creepy, it's scary. Essentially, where the guest cast are getting picked off one by one and you don't know what's exactly behind it. The Doctor and Leela have some great moments. Leela especially has some hilarious moments where she's dealing with a very hysterical, sort of stereotypical, you know, early 20th century lady, and is absolutely fed up of her nonsense and wallops around the face. But not that I'm condoning that, obviously. Why I love Horror of Fang Rock is just how well it's directed and acted. You know, it's not overlit, it looks moody, it looks scary. It's really one, especially this time of year, where the evenings are a bit darker and, you know, longer. It's a really good, tense, atmospheric watch this time of year. So go check that one out for the fourth Doctor. Okay, look, I know I said I was going to not pick the ones that people always recommend, but Earthshock is brilliant. This is probably the one that, this and another story that I'll get to later, are the two that really feel like modern Doctor Who in the classic era. It's action-packed, it's tense, it's got brilliant character moments. The Cybermen are at their like best in the classic era for me, apart from maybe another story. But this is fantastic because it really, you get that sort of family dynamic with the Fifth Doctor TARDIS team. You know, they're not necessarily, because quite a lot in the new series, it's very much the Doctor and his friends, isn't it? All great, but this really plays on the very realistic tensions that you do get in group dynamics like this. In any group, there's always a bit of tension somewhere, let alone different people that have sort of been almost forced together in a way. Because if you look at those companions, Adric's stowed away, Nyssa was basically abducted and left with the Doctor, and Tegan basically got stuck on the TARDIS and is trying to get off. They're all people that never really voluntarily joined the TARDIS with the Doctor. So to have that dynamic and have it be played on quite a lot is really interesting. It's something the modern series could really do with, you know, maybe picking up and paying a bit of homage to that, because it really does work. And like I said, it goes from being quite, you know, creepy. I know I keep saying it's creepy and atmospheric, but this is really true. It starts off very, you know, there's a big mystery, and you try and work out who's behind it. Obviously, you know who's behind it. It's not a big secret anymore. But it still plays it really well. It ramps up the tension, and then it just becomes this sort of all-out action adventure thing in the last 2 episodes or so. It's really, really well done, and I can't go on about this enough. It's another bonus pick time. Again, this one feels quite cliche to mention, but I don't really care because it's the 5 Doctors. We've reviewed this quite recently on the channel, and we had a ball watching it. It's one of those ones that's just such an easy watch, and it's a really good way for people to get into the classic era because it showcases all of the Doctors up to that point. So, you know, or not necessarily Tom Baker because he's not really in it, but the other Doctors, it shows them quite well. It shows how they are. Everyone's on top form in this. There's lots of little cameos in terms of the monsters and things. The Master's brilliant in it. There's a great little twist and a sort of a whodunit element to the plot. But the main thing that people love the 5 Doctors is just the interactions between the different companions and the Doctors and everything. And it really gets you can go into it and try and look and see which era stands out to you, and then go from there. It's just a really fun, and it's only 90 minutes long. Honestly, you'll have a blast watching this. The 6th Doctor's era is something that's not the easiest to get into when you're used to classic Who and stuff. The format changes. It almost becomes a bit more new series in the sense that it's 45-minute episodes, and they're all 2-parters essentially for Colin's main season. And it's quite difficult to try and pick one out to recommend because they're not necessarily the best in terms of the quality. Not judging Colin Baker or anything. It's just how the program was run at the time. There was a couple of mistakes that were made, and I think people have learned from that now. At least I'd like to think so. It's nearly 40 years on since then. But I'm going to suggest that you watch The Two Doctors. Now, this one is 3 parts. It's 45 minutes, so it's basically like a New Who 3-parter. There's Patrick Troughton comes back. There's the Sontarans again. It's a fun little plot that does get quite dark in places. I'm not going to lie. It does get a bit sort of like, ooh, but that's another way of, we can't all watch all the fun ones all the time, can we? Sometimes we do have to watch these. There's great interplay between the Doctors. It just takes them a little bit too long to meet. But it's shot really well. The direction of it is amazing. The location stuff in Spain as well looks absolutely stunning. There's a great incidental soundtrack to it. The Sontarans have this really cool bombastic military theme, and I love that. It's a really interesting story, and it's probably the highlight from that series for me, for Colin Baker's main series. But if you did want something else, Trial of a Time Lord is also, that's pretty accessible. So go check that out as well. It's another bonus pick. I'm going to go for Delta and the Bannermen for this simply because I love it. I've talked about this a couple of times on the channel. Delta and the Bannermen is one of those ones that I put on if I'm having a bad day or if something says, if I had some bad news or something. Delta and the Bannermen is one of those ones that you can just put on and have a laugh to. It's so camp, it's cheesy, it's so unapologetically camp. It's brilliant. There's some great lines in there. It's set in Wales, which that's enough for me. It's only 3 parts. It bombs along. It's just over an hour long, really, about an hour and a quarter, I think. But there's a great plot to it. Everyone's enjoying themselves. It's really fun. It's some great performances from some guest stars in there. Don Henderson as Gavrock is great. Stubby K's in there. There's a lot of brilliant performances, and I think this is one that's a really good laugh. It's not necessarily to everybody's tastes, but if you want something that's a bit of fun, definitely put this one on. My main recommendation for the 7th Doctor, this is the story that got me into Classic Who. I saw this before the new series was on. It came out on DVD. I don't think I would have seen it when it first came out. I think it must have been because my dad was getting DVDs at the time, and I was probably just caught it when it was on, and it just really catches me. It bombs along this. It's a really good action pace. It's Daleks and the military fighting each other. There's a Dalek civil war. There's Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred, who it's only their second story together, but it feels like they've been doing it for years. It's so good. And I can't really put into context of what it is that grabbed me, because it's like I said, it was the one that grabbed me when I was before the new series came back, so I must have been no more than 4 or 5 years old. But even now I can remember that Dalek going up the stairs. I can remember Ace beating up the Dalek with a baseball bat and jumping through the windows. It's so action packed. It looks like a big budget film, and for something that was cobbled together with an 80s TV budget, it stands up really well. This was the other one that I was talking about when I said that you want something that feels like a modern era episode, pick this. It's high energy, it's high action, it's paced so well. I know I keep repeating myself, but I absolutely adore it. And there's some really great little poignant scenes in there as well. It's not all action, it does slow down and give, the Doctor a bit of time to reflect, and Ace in a way as well. There's some great character moments between the two of them. It really develops their relationship and really solidifies them as one of the best Doctor companion parents of all time. Oh, and one more recommendation, just watch the movie, It's the only one I can really pick for the 8th Doctor. So yeah, that's another bonus pick. We've had 11, it's fine. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's given you a bit of an indication of where to start if you've not been into the classic series much. There's so many more that I could talk about, and probably we will get around to doing some more of these at some point. It's just that these are the ones that you can really sample different eras from and get a feel for what the show was like at that point. And if you like, you might watch The Mind Robber and want to check out some more of the 60s stuff, or you might watch Earthshock and go through some of the more family dynamic Peter Davison ones. Honestly, really, it's up to you. You could just pick one that you think stands out to you and watch that. But if you do watch any, let me know what you think in the comments. If you've got any recommendations of your own, be sure to leave them in the comments as well. Like the video, subscribe, and I will see you next week with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Tom, who's not here right now. I don't know why I've called him Mr. Tom either. That's quite weird. I'm going to shut up now and just go away. Go watch Classic Who.